It is March 1977. Welcome to Circleville, Ohio, a pretty average city in the extreme western lower region of the state, located in Montgomery County.
A city not known for controversy. A good, Bible and football kind of place.
Yeah. Down home, country people. Population's about 23,000. You make your way down to check the mailbox for updates and news when you pull out a mysterious and intriguing hand-scribed, all in capital letters, envelope. The letter's postmarked from Columbus, Ohio. That's 30 miles north of you. You open the letter, which has no return address, and find an equally disturbing and mysterious message inside. It has cryptic tones and the same weird, all-capital lettering. You're terrified. What are you reading? Who sent this? How do they know these very private things about you and your life? It's a threat by an unknown watcher, but one who obviously knows things. I mean, really knows things. Things nobody should know. In the coming months and years, almost 2 decades, hundreds of citizens in your small town in Circleville, Ohio, will receive thousands of similar letters, each with their own agenda, each telling citizens, I know what you did, and shame on you. Join us tonight for another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway and share the true tale of the Circleville Letters.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
So this is another one of our topic roulette topics.
I like that.
And we selected semi-random. We sort of sort them out.
Put some numbers on the.
We look at the date and we look, and we look at what pops up and we say which one
we got like 3 episodes,
the most. Yeah.
And out of these, what are we going to go with?
And so I had heard the story of the Circleville Letters. It probably popped up on Reddit or something. These mysterious, the way I heard it phrased, poison pen pal letters.
Oh, okay.
And like Eric said, it started in the spring of 1977 in Circleville, Ohio, which, I spent a lot of time in Ohio growing up. My grandmother lived in Ohio, and I would routinely go and spend the summers with her. And so I'm familiar with Ohio. And, small town, backwoods Ohio isn't very much different from Missouri.
No.
They say, a lot of people are like, well, Ohio is football and fields, and there's not much more than that. And to testify, I saw a lot of fields in Ohio, my man. They grow their corn and their soybeans, and I mean,
they take their sports very serious.
My grandma's house sat on a corner of a 4-way crossroads in Ohio, just outside Mechanicsburg, a nice sprawling ranch home, and the 2 corners that weren't bordered by road were bordered by cornfield. And I tell you, it's spooky if you walk into a cornfield when it's nice and tall and everything looks the same every direction.
Easy to get lost.
But here in this little town of Circleville, someone decided they were going to send some pretty personal, some pretty menacing, some pretty threatening at times letters. And it escalated. And again, to this day, no one really knows who did this. And again, a small town, just not really.
It could have been our town.
It could have been anywhere, yeah.
I mean.
But in the spring of 1977, starting in March, people began receiving these letters from a person identifying themselves only as writer. And again, there was violence, threats of violence, blackmail. Sometimes even as simple a motive as trying to coerce the receiver into complying with the writer's will, such as voting for the writer's preferred candidate in an election. I mean, sometimes it was just a little more than that. But the first wave, and I say first wave, like Eric said, this went on for decades. The first wave started in March of 1977 and continued on for about a year. Like you said, most were postmarked from Columbus, Ohio, just 30 minutes north. Yeah, close enough.
Yeah.
And mainly at first, they were focused on the exploits, the life of one Gordon Massey, who was the married Westfall school superintendent, whom the writer accused of having an affair with a school bus driver by the name of Mary Gillespie. Now, she sort of became the focal point for these letters at first. I think she was the first one to receive one. But eventually her husband would receive letters. Her children would become embroiled in this. The first letter was received on March of 1977.
Mrs. Gillespie, stay away from Massey. Don't lie when questioned about meeting him. I know where you live. I've been observing your house and I know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it serious. Everyone concerned has been notified and everything will be over soon.
In that same month, Mary would receive a second letter.
This is your last chance to report him. I know you're a pig and will prove it and shame you out of Ohio. A pig sneaks around and meets other women's husbands behind their backs only because families, homes, marriages to suffer. You are such a pig and I will prove it. Why doesn't he come to your rescue? Or has he too much to lose? His wife, in which pigs like you take advantage of. His $28,500 a year a job. His kickbacks. How's your little girl? Will she grow up to be like you?
A little aside, and I'm sure it's the time frame. 28.5.
Yeah,
for a school
yearly,
superintendent.
Annual. It's like,
yeesh.
oof.
That doesn't pay the bills, man.
Yeah. That's why she's driving a bus, apparently.
But yeah, the Gillespies were receiving these letters. And again, it was Mary at first. But she received additional letters even after that, threatening to expose the affair if it didn't end, warning her not to tell anyone about the letters. Ron, her husband, would receive a letter shortly thereafter.
Mr. Gillespie, your wife is seeing Gordon Massey. You should catch them together and kill them both. He doesn't deserve to live.
And, much like his wife, Ron received other letters.
Mr. Gillespie, you're doing a lot for her. No one cares that much for anyone this day. Make him come to her rescue, but he won't. He's being awful good lately. He knows what he must do, but he won't. Make her admit the truth. Call the school board. His affairs must stop. Everyone will know soon. Think of yourself.
And there's still, another letter. It was just as threatening.
Gillespie, you've had 2 weeks and done nothing. Admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBs, posters, signs, and billboards until the truth comes out.
And even with all this going on, the writer also began to add handwritten signs posted in town, and especially along Mary Gillespie's bus route, with some of them accusing Gordon Massey of sexually assaulting her 12-year-old daughter.
Ew.
I mean, these were meant to get a reaction. This was meant to goad someone to action.
And whoever this person is, I mean, truly, $28,500
they knew
a year.
details.
They knew details.
Yeah.
On one of them, they actually spell out Mrs. Gillespie's, I guess they had like a badge number for a bus.
Oh, I didn't see that
They
one.
knew that number.
Wow.
They knew how long she had driven. I mean, it was like they have access to files.
Well, that talks about potentially our first suspect here. From the beginning, Mary suspected fellow bus driver David Longberry. Now, she had previously rejected his romantic advances, and he still acted very resentful towards her. So Mary and Ron turned to Ron's sister and her husband, Karen and Paul Freshour, for help. Now, Paul's sister was also told what was going on. Now, they were told not to share this information, obviously, but they figured amongst the group of them there. Now, they decided Paul should write David Longberry a letter of their own. And in the letter, Paul said he knew David was writing threatening letters to Mary and Ron. I guess just calling him out and you know, you need to stop.
Yeah, we know it's you.
They believed the plan worked, since the letters did stop coming. For a few weeks, at least. Well, Ron began to investigate who was sending these letters, and he came to believe it was Gordon Massey himself sending the letters. I guess he even confronted Massey at one point, but Massey denied any involvement, saying that he, too, had received letters. So, I mean, obviously he's not going to send them to himself. Ron would then receive a letter threatening to kill him if he didn't stop his investigation. Now, in August of 1977, same year, Mary went on a vacation with her sister-in-law to Florida. Ron told Mary before she left he knew who the letter writer was. He'd figured it out, and he was going to take care of it while she was in Florida. And on the night of the 17th, Ron received an anonymous phone call. Moments later, he grabbed his .22 pistol and stormed out of the house, telling his daughter he was going to confront the letter writer. He would be home, I guess, telling their kids. Now, after he left, he was on his way to confront the letter writer, and no one really knows what happened. But they do know that at some point, Ron's truck went off the road and slammed into a tree, single car accident, and Ron would die on the scene from his injuries. Now, in the autopsy, Ron was found to have had almost twice the legal limit of alcohol in his system. Everyone who knew him said that Ron rarely drank, and no one who had been with him that day said he'd been drinking at all.
They interviewed the daughter even years later, and she was at least of age. I think she would have recognized, and they were like, Dad was not drunk. He had not even been drinking that night.
Now, his death was ruled an accident, but Paul Freshour, Ron's brother-in-law, considered it a murder. And even the police, there were so many weird facts about it. Police determined that Gillespie's gun had been fired once before his death. There was no casing on the scene. And there was no evidence. They couldn't find the spent round anywhere. They never learned why it was fired. Had he confronted the letter writer? Had he tried to shoot someone that night? Only after Ron's death did Mary come forward and admit to having an affair with Massey.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, that was true. But, strangely enough, she claimed it only happened after she started receiving the letters.
If you're going to accuse us, well, we might as well go ahead and do it.
That's really great logic, right?
Yeah.
But after Ron's death, the letters continuing to target Mary Gillespie and Gordon Massey.
Everyone knows what you've done. If you don't believe us, just make them mad and find out yourself.
Letters after that point even began to allege that Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe was involved in a cover-up relating to Ron's death.
Oh, yes. Well, the sheriff at the time, Dwight Radcliffe, originally suspected foul play was involved on Ron's death, and there was even a person of interest in the case who was interviewed and given a polygraph test, which they passed. Now, the person of interest was never publicly identified, but after the coroner, David Ray Carroll, examined the body and found the high blood alcohol level, Sheriff Radcliffe changed his mind and believed Ron's death was an accident caused by drunk driving. But apparently, Sheriff Radcliffe had motivation to cover up this possible murder as he was running for president of the National Sheriff's Association, and in a town plagued not only by unhinged letter writing, but one who had turned to murder, would certainly not be a good look for the president of this organization. Now, the letter writer was also frustrated by the lack of investigation into the case and wrote letters claiming against Sheriff Radcliffe that he was covering up the truth of Ron's death. Letters also accused Dr. Carroll, the coroner, of sexual abuse of young children. After Ron's death, the harassment continued, with letters being sent not only to Mary, but citizens around the town, to the newspaper, to local businesses, to schools, basically to everyone in Circleville. Other residents were scared since the letter writers seemed completely unhinged and knew details of their lives that no stranger should have had any way of knowing. Meanwhile, Paul Freshour was insistent that Ron had been murdered and even filed a report requesting that the FBI investigate Ron's death. And though Mary had always denied having an affair with Gordon, as we had said, while her husband was alive, she follows right into suit and basically says, yeah, we did, but it was after all of that.
Yeah, that's a shame, really. But the second wave of letters began in 1982. Mary, once again, the victim, received a note written on the back of a Christmas card.
Just tell your daughter we're going to post some signs about her next year at the bus stops. Since you've caused all of this by what you've done to Mrs. Massey, and all knows it, how will you face her? But your type have no consciences, or you wouldn't have hurt Mrs. Massey behind her back.
Well, true to their word, on the afternoon of February 7th, 1983, the writer hung up an obscene sign about Mary's daughter visible from the bus route that Mary drove.
This part's crazy.
It contained obscenities regarding her 13-year-old daughter. And obviously that's low by anybody's
You're
standards.
crossing lines here, buddy.
Well, Mary was on her way to school to pick up students that day, so she had an empty bus, so she felt that she had time to stop. So she got out, she went and took down the sign, and when she tugged on the sign, she found it was attached to a box by a length of twine. Well, not knowing what else to do, she took the box with her, put it all in the bus. And when she got home, she opened up the box and found inside that it was actually a booby trap. There was a loaded gun with a string attached to the trigger, and for whatever reason, it failed to fire like it was supposed to when she picked it up. So
it very luckily, essentially like shot her in the face.
Yeah, luckily for her, it just failed to go off. This gave police their first big break in the case. They were able to recover the serial number from the gun. This gun was traced back to a co-worker of a guy, he worked with Paul Freshour, Ron Gillespie's brother-in-law, who told police he'd sold the gun to Paul. So now you have this improvised homemade booby trap with a gun that we now know is in the possession of Paul Freshour, the brother-in-law. Paul's wife, Karen Sue, when confronted, told the police that her husband had been the letter writer the whole time.
Ooh.
They were involved in a contentious divorce, and she said that she had evidence, and she had discovered letters hidden throughout their home. Freshour denied being the letter writer and claimed the gun had been stolen from him weeks earlier. Unfortunately, a polygraph test determined that was a lie. Paul was arrested in 1984 and convicted of attempted murder due to the improvised booby trap gun there. Now, during the trial, it was revealed that Paul's fingerprints were not found on either the gun or the box it had been found in. But Paul had also been off work the same day the booby trap was found. And the box was similar to a style of box used at his workplace. I believe he worked for Anheuser-Busch at the time. Paul also said he had a pretty good alibi for the day, as he had taken the day off work because he was having work done on his home. And multiple witnesses testified to seeing him there that day.
Now, the sheriff's office had told Paul when they had him in custody, give him one of these letters and said, we'd like for you to copy the Circleville letter. Try to emulate the handwriting of the letter the best that you can. A practice that is very much not proper procedure when you're going to be using it to compare handwriting. Usually the suspect is asked to write a sample of their own handwriting, not to attempt to copy someone else's handwriting.
Yeah, the idea is they look at your normal handwriting.
Yeah. Well, in addition to the handwriting sample, Paul Freshour failed the polygraph test that day, and his ex-wife Karen, as Bill had said, told the police that he was behind all of the letters. So when they went to court, they actually used that against Paul. And they said, look how much Paul's letter looks just like this letter.
Here, copy this letter. Isn't it weird how they look the same?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, come on, what judge is going to allow this? But
well,
apparently
somebody did.
Yeah, apparently this was allowed. So, yeah, do your best to copy it, make it look as good as you can, and this will help you. Yep. And then a couple months later, you're in court, and look how close these look. This is the guilty guy.
Well, and ultimately sentenced to 7 to 25 years in prison for attempted murder. Now, if Paul's letter writer and Paul goes to prison, letters stop, right?
Oh, absolutely.
No. Even with Paul in jail, letters continue to circulate around Circleville.
Pleased, let's keep Ryder happy. You've been watched. Failure to comply, and you shall suffer. No one can help. No one can protect you. Obey, obey. Get Mr. Massey elected to some type of office, or you will surely pay, and the town of Circleville shall too. It's all on you.
Hundreds of letters flooded Circleville mailboxes following Freshour's imprisonment. The warden declared Freshour couldn't be sending them because he didn't even have access to pens or paper in prison. And some letters had been sent when Paul was in solitary confinement with no access to mail at all.
They put you in solitary confinement. You have nothing in there.
Paul himself received an anonymous letter while in prison, bragging about how he'd been set up.
Freshour, now when are you going to believe you aren't getting out of there? I told you 2 years ago, when we set them up. They stay set up. Don't you listen at all? No one wants you out. No one. The joke is on you. Ha ha. Tell no one of this letter. I saw the paper. Great news. Great. The sheriff loved it. Ha ha ha. Do you believe it now? Do you?
During this time, one of the most high-profile cases of letter writing involved a local school official who was killed in a car crash after receiving a letter. The writer claimed responsibility for the crash and threatened to do the same to other officials. When the letters didn't stop, obviously it wasn't Paul, suspicions turned elsewhere. And now suspicion turned to Karen Sue, Paul's ex-wife. She had gotten the worst end of their divorce, financially speaking, as well as losing custody of their daughters. Her boyfriend even matched a witness description of someone who had been seen at the booby trap crime scene. The witness described a large man with sandy hair next to an El Camino. Karen's boyfriend was a large man with sandy hair, and her brother drove an El Camino. Unfortunately, there was never enough to link the two together. Now, in 1993, prison inmate Thomas Lee Dillon sent a letter to the Columbus Dispatch, a paper I might add that I have read the comics out of many times, claiming he wrote the letters. Dillon had a history of violent behavior and was serving life in prison for murder. Authorities did find similarities between his handwriting and that of the letters, but there was not enough there to conclusively link him to the crime. And now in December of 1993, Unsolved Mysteries came to Circleville to talk about the story.
This is interesting.
They themselves received an anonymous letter.
Forget Circleville, Ohio. Do nothing to hurt Sheriff Radcliffe. If you come to Ohio, you El Sickos will pay. The Circleville writer.
El Sickos. I like that touch.
El Sickos.
Now, during this time, when Unsolved Mysteries was prowling about Circleville trying to put together their show, it was noted that Paul's ex-wife Karen seemed very concerned that the show was investigating the case.
Well, now we're going to get some if we didn't already have national exposure, we're definitely going to get national exposure because let me tell you, back in the day, Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh, that was I watched that.
Huge.
I remember watching that at the time. Maybe not that particular episode, but I remember watching a lot of Unsolved Mysteries.
I remember eagerly waiting for, the next week's episode.
According to Paul's niece, Karen kept track of everyone that the show was talking to. I mean, it was just, how did no one think to investigate her? She was drawing all the attention to herself. Even Paul had heard how involved she was. As a matter of fact, Paul begged the show to look deeper into the case, hoping it would reopen the investigation and find out who the real writer was. The third wave of letters began in 1994 and ended November of that year. It was only after Fresh Hour was released on parole in 94 that the writer ceased threatening the residents of Circleville. Now, before the letter writer ended their campaign, nearly everyone in town had either received a letter or knew someone who did. And like Eric said, recipients included local residents, elected officials, police officers, the local papers.
Everybody, yeah.
By the time the final letter was received, it is believed that close to 1,000 letters were sent by the writer.
Now, I will say, we've shared a few of the letters. A lot of these letters never came public because the people didn't want their private lives aired. Yeah. There's so much private information in these.
Yeah, even
they don't want them shared.
Even during Paul's court case, a lot of letters were not submitted for that reason alone. They weren't directly involved in the case. And so people were like, no, I mean, if it's not going to help, I'm not giving you the letter.
Yeah, we're not going to air our dirty laundry.
Yeah. In 2006, former police officer James Renner, who grew up in Circleville, began to investigate the case. And he found new evidence that led him to a potential new suspect. Former school superintendent Dwight L. Bowman. Renner believed Bowman had a motive for sending the letters since he had been fired from his position and had a grudge against several of the individuals who received letters. Bowman died in 2009, however, and was never questioned about any involvement.
So we have, we roll forward to August 2021, and the title is The Writer is Unmasked. In August 2021, the CBS show 48 Hours aired an episode that they claimed definitively that they had identified the Circleville letter writer through new forensic document and examination. CBS hired a document examiner, Beverly East, who compared the Centerville's letters to Paul Freshour's known handwriting, not the exhibit where he was asked to copy it. She found numerous links between the letter writer's handwriting and Paul's own handwriting.
I believe there was something about the G's were very distinctive.
Yep. Especially in the information of his numbers. Now, East said there were patterns in the anonymous letters that did not match Paul's handwriting, but found more than 100 what she called quirks of Paul's writing that did match. And there was mentions of the way he hooked his small letter G's, and especially with numbers. And on the examples, at least, like where you write the number 7, you have the little hash through the top, or a 0 and you put a slash, that type of stuff. So just, we have all of this going on. Now, however, not all the experts agree that Paul Freshour was responsible for writing the letters. Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole does not believe there's enough evidence to state that Paul was truly the letter writer. In particular, O'Toole points to the letters that were sent while Paul was in prison. Since it was physically impossible for Paul to write and send these letters, it seems clear that had to be another person involved. Not to mention where he was imprisoned. Paul had been imprisoned in Lima, Ohio, but the letters that were coming out were still coming postmarked Columbus. So not only was he somehow finding a way to write the letters, smuggling them out of jail, they weren't then mailed from Lima. They were taken all the way to Columbus, then dropped in the post office there to be mailed back to the town. So there were many things there that weren't adding up.
I believe there's also a theory that there may have been more than one culprit.
Yes. So I think that is another one that came out. Overall, O'Toole believes the letters were written by a female writer and that the letter writer was not well educated. Paul Freshour had 3 college degrees, including a master's degree.
I will say, reading the letters, there were multiple misspellings and a lack of punctuation.
A lack of punctuation entirely. Even as I was trying to research, I would have to reread some of them because it's like, is there supposed to be a comma there, a period?
I filled in punctuation on my own just because it was like, okay, that's a question.
Yeah.
So
despite the claims of 48 Hours saying that they clearly had identified who it was, In fact, probably not. Definitively identifying the letter writer, I still feel, is inconclusive, as well as the FBI also agreed. The question of who wrote the letters, who set the booby trap for Mary Gillespie, and whether or not Ron Gillespie had died as a result of an accident or foul play is yet to be answered, even some almost 50 years later.
Don't say that, Eric. I was born in 77.
It hurts, doesn't it, Bill? It hurts every morning when you try to get out of bed.
Well, Paul went to his grave swearing his innocence. He stood on that. He really wholeheartedly stood by the fact that it was not him and died standing on that.
And you made this letter and it looks just like this one.
And as of May of 2024, officially, the writer still remains unknown. Now, I think there's enough evidence here to point very strongly at Karen Sue. There's motive. There's eyewitness accounts, which put someone who she would have been associated with at the scene.
FBI specialist said it was a female.
Yeah, she seemed to be very concerned when Unsolved Mystery showed up.
Why would you be? If you weren't guilty?
If you were innocent, what do you got to worry about?
If nothing else, it'd be like, oh, please come talk to this person, because we want to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if I was going to look at the case, and I would say she would definitely be my main suspect right now.
Well, the letter writer also made accusations against this Roger Klein, who was a prosecutor who helped to convict Paul Freshour. But those are a bit harder to confirm. Specifically, he was accused of having an affair with the school teacher and then having her murdered when he found out that she was pregnant. But despite some random couple in Ohio confirming this story to a TV news station, there's literally really no evidence that Klein became, involved in that aspect. I don't know if you mentioned, but Paul did die in 2012 at the age of 70. And like you said, right up to the time of his death, he never, I'm innocent. I had nothing to do with this.
Now, there was one detail I saw that was kind of strange and unusual, to say the least. But Paul did eventually come out and say he believed that his one of Mary's sons, I believe, if I remember correctly, had stolen the gun. He believed, but no one could understand why the son would have tried to set up Paul. They don't believe he would have tried to hurt Mary in any way. So,
yeah, and again, if the booby trap would have worked, it would have shot her right in the face. Now, another odd element, as if there weren't enough already, in this case is, I think, the glaring absence of Gordon Massey from all the reporting of the events himself. Very rarely did he ever seem to even get questioned, much less interviewed.
I mean, by anyone other than Paul, or not Paul, Ron. I'm sorry,
by Ron,
Mary's husband.
And, you would think with all the accusations that would have been a key person, at least you would want to go interview and talk to.
As much as his name comes up, you'd think.
So I thought that was kind of strange. Massey did later come forward and did have 2 romantic relationships after Ron's death, and yet there's very little information about that available. Despite the huge amounts of information for many of the other people involved in the case, Massey was a well-respected member of the Circleville community and was married with a son, and he died in 1996. So, Bill, is it time for headlines?
Well, for my headline, we like our lists.
Lists work well.
From the Columbus Navigator by Chelsea Wiley, dated October 13th, 2023. 10, and I will say I edited it down from 11. They covered the Circleville Letters in this article. So 10 hair-raising urban legends around Ohio.
11 seems like an odd number.
Yeah, it's a weird number.
It's a weird number.
5, 10, those seem like, or 12 even.
Yeah.
Dozen. Ohio is more than just land and fields and football, which I joked about earlier. It's also home to a host of creepy, haunted, and downright weird places, from ghost towns to giant lake monsters to mysterious letters. And I'm not going to talk about the letters, obviously.
Well, you've already talked about the letters. Yeah.
Ohio's darker side is a fascinating tale of the bizarre and eerie, as in, number 1, Bessie, the Lake Erie monster. In Lake Erie lurks Bessie, or the South Bay Bessie. This lake monster has intrigued northeastern Ohio and Michigan for centuries, with first recorded sightings dating back to 1817, and in recent decades, sightings have become more frequent and detailed. Described as snake-like, Bessie is believed to be 30 to 40 feet long, at least a foot in diameter, and adorned with a mysterious grayish hue. The ghost of Lake Hope Furnace. Within the Lake Hope State Park, a spectral tale unfolds during stormy nights. The forlorn spirit of a watchman who once safeguarded the now decaying furnace is said to roam the area, his lantern casting an eerie glow. This furnace, operational from 1854 to 1874, served as the heart of iron ore processing from the region's sandstone bedrock. The watchman met his tragic end during a brutal storm and is believed that he continues his eternal rounds. The Mudhouse Mansion.
Mudhouse.
The Mudhouse Mansion in Lancaster was a source of chilling tales. Although the house itself has since been torn down, several ghost stories plague the property. The most popular is that the home was the original location of the iconic Bloody Mary.
Ooh.
And that the house was haunted by a woman who killed her children. Moonville, an abandoned coal mining town. Moonville is known for the haunted Moonville Tunnel. This historic tunnel, surrounded by Ohio legends, is believed to be home to a ghostly figure who met a tragic end beneath its tracks. Rogues Hollow, often dubbed Ohio's Sleepy Hollow, was a coal mining village, notorious for outlaws and gangsters. The town's eerie tales include a crying baby at night, which we've heard before. Heard before, in quotes. Ghost trains, and even Ohio's very own Headless Horseman. Witch's Tower. The Lookout Tower in Hills and Dells Metro Park, often dubbed the Witch's Tower or Frankenstein's Tower, has a dark history. In 1967, a lightning strike claimed the life of a teenager named Peggy Harmison while she sought shelter in the tower during a storm. Since then, the tower has earned a certain reputation with visitors, claiming to see a ghostly girl or boy whenever lightning illuminates the sky. The Ohio State Reformatory. Known for its haunting beauty, the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield has been the backdrop for numerous movies and is famous for its paranormal activity. Visitors have reported eerie occurrences and ghostly sightings within its imposing walls. The Franklin Castle. Known as the most haunted house in Ohio, Cleveland's imposing Franklin Castle is a historic structure cloaked in dark legends. The home was built in the late 1800s, and although rumors of Prohibition-era mystery passageways and hidden chambers persist, the only known hidden passage is a small stairway used by servants to get from the kitchen to the front door. And finally, the Majestic Theater. The Majestic Theater in Chillicothe has a long history of entertaining audiences, but it also has its share of ghostly stories. Many have reported unexplained phenomena and ghostly figures within its hallowed walls. Visitors claim to see several apparitions, including soldiers who died during a Spanish flu outbreak, and a mysterious little girl, and even a janitor who walks the halls, his keys jingling as he goes.
Well, my headline I took from an online account called The Cut, and it was dated October 11th, 2022. It was entitled The Watcher, very similar to the story we talked about tonight. A family had bought their dream house, but according to the creepy letters they soon started to get, they weren't the only ones interested in it. On one night in June of 2014, Derek Brodius had just finished an evening of painting at his new home in Westfield, New Jersey. When he went outside to check the mail, now Derek and his wife Maria had closed on the 6-bedroom house at 657 Boulevard just 3 days earlier, and they were doing a bit of touch-ups and renovations before they moved in. So there really wasn't much in the mail except for a few bills and a white card-shaped envelope, and it was addressed in thick, chunky handwriting, simply to the new owner. And a typed note inside began very warmly. But as Derek kept reading the letter from his new neighbor, it took a weird turn.
How did you end up here?
The writer asked.
Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within?
The letter went on.
657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and it approaches its 110th birthday. I've been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched it in the 1960s. And now it's my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out.
The author's disturbing was, basically telling of a family legacy almost of stalking of this house. The letter identified the Brodius's Honda minivan, as well as the workers renovating the home.
I see already that you have flooded 657 with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to have been.
The person wrote.
Tisk, tisk, tisk. Bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy.
Earlier in the week, Derek and Maria had gone to the house and chatted with their new neighbors. While their children, who were 5, 8, and 10 years old, ran around the backyard with several kids from the neighborhood. The letter writer seemed to have noticed.
You have children. I've seen them. So far, I think, there are 3 that I have counted.
The anonymous correspondent wrote, but before asking if there were more on the way.
Do you need to fill the house with young blood? I requested. Better for me. Was your old house just too small for your growing family, or was it greed to bring you more children into my house? I must know their names, so I will call to them and draw them to me.
Now, the envelope had no return address.
Who am I?
The person wrote.
There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each and every day. I'm one of those. Look out the windows. You can see 657 Boulevard. Maybe I'm in one of them. Look out at the many windows on 657 Boulevard at all the people who stroll by each day. Maybe I'm one of them.
The letter concluded with a suggestion that the message would not be the last, simply saying,
Welcome, my friends, welcome. Let the party begin.
Wow.
followed by a signature typed in cursive font.
The Watcher.
That's creepy.
That's creepy. Now, the story goes on and on. The new family moved in, actually reached back to the people they bought it off of and asked them, did you ever get any letters? Did anything like this happen? And they paused.
Oh.
And they said, well, not in the entire 20 some years we were living there, but the last days as we were moving out, we did receive a letter wishing us the best and sorry to see us leaving. They had been watching us for a great long time.
Wow. That's weird. That's almost like I saw a video not that long ago of a guy who was renting a house in a pretty upscale British neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And the neighbor came over and was like, hey, do you have time to talk? And the guy's like, okay. He goes, you know, you're not wanted here, right? And the guy's like, what do you mean? He goes, well, this is a nice neighborhood full of people that own their homes and have families. I notice you don't have any children and you're simply renting.
Oh.
And I mean, just real derogatory to the guy. And he's like, well, I mean, I've got a contract. The owner's renting. Yeah. But I mean, understand that we don't want renters in this area.
Your locale.
Yeah.
Here. Well, these letters continued.
657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in. It's been years and years since young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Have you found all the secrets that it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement, or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I know I would have been, if I were them. It's far away from the rest of the house, don't you agree? If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream.
Oh my, that's threatening.
Will they sleep in the attic, or will you all sleep on the second floor? Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It'll help me know which is which, and whose bedroom, and I can plan better. All of the windows and doors at 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you, and to track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I'm the Watcher, and I've been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move, and kindly sold it when I asked them to. I pass by it many times a day. 657 Boulevard it's my job. It's my life. Dare I say my obsession. And now you are, too, the Bradius family. Welcome to the product of your greed. Greed is what brought you here to 657 Boulevard, and now it has brought you to me. Have a happy moving in day. You know, I'll be watching.
Again, the story goes on and on. They go to the police. The police like, have you seen him? Has he done anything? Has he come on your property? Nope. Well, then there's really nothing we can do. So they just kind of dismiss it.
That's when you leave the shades open, and if you have let's say a body shape like mine, you just walk around the house naked. You want to see it? Here it is.
You want to see it all. Well, they get a little aggravated. They hire their own private investigators. They have people staked outside, I think, in good reason to help protect them at night. Friends and stuff are starting to come over. The story just goes on and on, but the letters kind of contribute that they have a hatred towards the wealthy from other towns. And it states coming into their hometown and trying to take over. So that's kind of the gist of the letters, it seems. The mystery of who actually wrote these letters still remains a mystery, much like our earlier story. But there were many theories, one of which the Bradises were writing these letters themselves to somehow bring attention to the home, who seemed to be struggling financially with the price of the home and renovations and with obviously raising a family. There were several proposed options, one of which was to sell it, but whenever potential buyers would read the letters, they fled, and I can't blame them for that. Another was just to demolish the grand old house, bulldozing it to make way for a multi-dwelling that could be, could bring a lot more revenue in for the family, which again kind of goes back to the letter striking that greed brought you here. While vague mentions of revenge was cast, the letters started getting even more aggressive, stating,
You will die for what you are trying to do. Maybe in a fire, maybe in a car crash. There are ways the house will get retribution.
Now, the house finally did sell, I believe it was in 2016, to an older family with teenage children, not young children. And the watcher did not seem to approve. They said these people got letters too. They said they wanted a young family to be there so they could watch them grow up, to share their memories, not teenagers, because they were pesky and, ill-respected and didn't have good manners.
It sounds like an older person.
Yeah.
Who's just creepy.
Well,
with nothing better to do.
One of the things that was intriguing was the spelling in the letter of the Bradis's family. It was phonetically spelt. So it was almost like they were close enough that maybe they would have heard.
They'd heard it, but they never seen it.
The construction people may be talking to them, yes, sir, Mr. Bradis or whatever. But it wasn't spelt right. But beside that, they actually got the children's names. They got the children's ages. They later identified which bedrooms who had. So definitely someone was watching. So that just creepy tale.
That's weird. Well, my question
for
the night. Have you yourself ever received a strange or unsettling, I would say letter, but let's go ahead.
You were going to ask if I'd written any, and it's like, well, there's too many to really, no, I'm sorry.
Let's go ahead and say letter, or we can bump it up to the modern age and let's say email. Have you received any? Because and I don't mean like scam emails, like, hey, your package you never ordered arrived at the post office. If you send us, blah,
right.
But I mean something that was just really kind of strange, unusual, kind of stands out, like you didn't understand where it came from. Or
I have something similar. It's a little different. When I was a manager of my family's floor covering store, we had a envelope that appeared up front. A traditional carpet store, where you have the carpet samples, you flip through, you look at the colors. We had a couple that came in very specifically asking for this certain mill, this certain carpet, this certain color, and they wanted to see a sample. So, okay, they must saw it online or whatever, so we took them up there. They didn't stay 5 minutes. They didn't check the sample out. They just dismissed themselves and left. So we thought that was kind of weird. So we went back up front. We were kind of talking about it, and it's like, well, what sample was it? Well, while we were up there looking, we found a very thick envelope that had been slid directly behind that particular carpet sample, that particular mill, that particular color. Mind was turning. It's like, there's no name on it. It's just a white blank envelope, very thick.
Yeah.
Bill, we opened the envelope up. Guess what was inside of it?
My mind is going to say cold hard cash.
Absolutely. Somewhere in the vicinity, it's been many years, but it was well over $3,000.
Sounds like somebody was using it as a dead drop.
Yeah. So I won't say an exact amount, but it was a very substantial amount of like $100 bills.
Wow.
We were just like, what do we do with this? So we called the city cops.
Yeah, you go to the cops.
They immediately come down. They took a statement. We obviously didn't even have much to go on. We didn't even get these people's names.
Yeah.
They were there, like I said, maybe a total of 5 minutes. We told them the story. They documented everything. They, of course, took the envelope. For whatever reason, it got handed over to the sheriff's office instead of the city.
Well, I mean, it could be like an organized crime thing. So maybe it's bigger than the city. Maybe. It may have been a case in progress and.
So obviously it was the talk of the next week, 2 weeks. I mean, I wonder what in the world that was. Our minds, a dead drop, something.
Yeah, absolutely.
So finally, being the manager, by peer pressure of the employees, they're like, have you heard anything? And it's like, well, no, I'm not sure they would tell me anything anyhow. But I said, I've got some appointments. I've got to drive around. I'm going to swing by the sheriff's office and I'll just ask for an update. Bill, there was no record of any envelope going in to the department, no record of any officer of the city coming to take said report. There was nothing. Well, that's about as weird of an envelope package story as I can give you.
Far be it from me to engage in conspiracy theorist thinking, but with some of the stories I've heard of the Lebanon area, I wonder if maybe it was a drop specifically to get it to the cops for some reason.
My mind still spins on that today.
That's crazy.
Ironically, probably every couple holidays we get together because, I mean, it's family business. That gets brought up.
Yeah, I imagine.
And we're still like, I wonder what all that was about.
So for me, way back in the mid-90s, I'd say, had an internet account, one of my first internet accounts, and I was fascinated with vampires in those days, so I believe it was someone who knew me in some capacity. But I started to receive anonymous emails, an email address that had nothing in it to distinguish it as belonging to anyone in particular.
I didn't know you at this time, so it wasn't me.
No, it wasn't you. Claiming to be a psychic vampire.
Ooh.
And giving details, enough about my family and stuff that they obviously knew me, whoever they were. And I would get one about once a week, and I would respond to it because I thought it was a fun little game. I didn't think anybody was doing anything,
Right.
But I was like, hey, whatever. So I would respond to them and, say my piece, and, then I'd get another one like a few days later or whatever. But one of my brother's friends came to my brother one day saying that he had been chased while walking to a friend's house, I think it was, and had almost been like run over, like if he hadn't jumped off the road.
Oh my.
And that he believed it had something to do with the emails I was receiving. Because of course I was talking to my brother's friends about it. I was talking to my friends about it. I thought it was funny. I was like, I didn't. So he's like, I really wish you would just let it go, man. I don't know what's going on, but I think it somehow had something to do with that. Which, to be fair, leads me to believe it had somehow something to do with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't have put it past some of my brother's friends to have done this. But even though I have asked multiple times over the years, my brother claims that he does not know who was responsible for those emails. And so I've never figured out who sent me those.
That is weird.
That's kind of weird.
Honestly, I was thinking how I would have reacted. I probably would have acted the same way, especially
I thought it was a joke.
At the age, yeah. That's cool. I'll play along. Yeah, why not? All right. Well, my question is, we both own, or at least are paying towards owning our own houses. In all the years, I don't know how many places you've lived in. I know I've lived in several different homes. What's the coolest or weirdest or neatest thing you've ever discovered or found out about a place that you have lived? Doesn't have to be paranormal. It could just be an interesting fact. It could be weird. It could be just something that happened there.
I touched on this on an earlier episode. The house we lived on 28 Highway was allegedly haunted. And I talked about how, the original construction, it was a log cabin that had been built around, had well water and all that. And the kids at school routinely asked me if we had anything happen because that house was supposed to be haunted. It's the house where my brother and I watched the light go along the stream.
Oh, okay. Backyard. I remember that story now. Okay.
I talked about it. Honestly, it was just a handful of episodes ago, to be honest.
I remember the mention that it was a log cabin. I thought, being the history buff, I thought, wow, that goes back there.
If you want to get past that one, since we've already talked about it, when I moved into the house I live in right now, when we first went into the attic to do something, I don't remember what we did. There was a small collection of Halloween decorations that apparently the previous owners had left behind, which seemed weird to only be Halloween decorations. And when you go into the attic space, it's, top of the house,
peak.
And down at one end, there's a little hole, like a small doorway, but just a hole in the wall that goes into another little area. And to this day, I have never gathered the necessary courage to go and look and see what's in there, just in case.
Maybe the Christmas decorations are back there.
Well, again, my house has been added onto multiple times, and I think that it just goes into the roof area above the dining room.
Oh, okay.
But again, it's just a little.
So, what is the oldest area? The log cabin area?
The other house. That was a different house.
Okay. Yeah.
No, that was a different house. The log cabin area in that one was obviously the oldest. So, but no, that was the house I'm living in now.
Okay.
That in the attic there is where I found the Halloween stuff. And apparently one of my a young lady I used to work with by the name of Amanda had apparently grown up in that neighborhood and knows that house very well because she used to play with I think play with a young lady, another girl that lived there at the same time.
Yeah, when they were kids.
So it was kind of, like one of those little small world moments.
Yeah.
Where she's like, oh, I know the layout of your house. And she told me about it. I was like, how do you know all this? And she's
Have
like,
you been in my house?
She's like, I used to play there when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, okay.
Well, for me, and I've talked about the Victorian house on Madison, the big 3-story house that my wife Sarah and I owned, but I wanted to do a different story because there was a few haunting things, and I've talked about that.
Yeah.
But that's why I threw in kind of the neatest aspect. That house was actually built by Mr. Hodge, who helped bring the Frisco Railroad Company to town. And I may or may not have mentioned it. The fireplace mantel in the entry hall was the shape of the San Francisco Railroad emblem. That was the mirror
That's neat.
inset. Yeah, I thought that was kind of a cool aspect. So we knew the house had history, and again, us being history buffs, I happened to stumble across, on good old eBay, a postcard, early shot, like 1920s, maybe 1915, of Madison Avenue in general, and it had a picture of our house in it.
Huh.
And it was one of those that had been like hand-colored later on, but it was made off of an old original photograph. And that area was known as the White District, not for the reasons you might think.
I was going to say racism.
No, not at all. But every house on Madison Avenue was a white house with black shutters, black trim. I mean, it was just kind of that almost a colonial type look. But anyhow, I found that postcard, and I thought that was really cool. And then when we sold the house, I had mixed emotion. I didn't want to leave the original, but I did go up and have an 8.5 by 11 blown up, and we left that for the new owners. I even bought a little frame, and we put it right there on the mantle.
That is uniquely you.
Yeah,
I
thought.
mean, I could see you do.
Now
Like,
imagine
no one else would think to do something like that.
The person probably coming in is like, "What the hell is this?" I just left it and probably chucked it. But I did have a little deal written on the back and everything. So hopefully they took the time to read it. But
that is a very Eric
that's
thing
a very
to do.
Eric thing. I'll take that as a compliment. But yeah, I mean, I was just like, what's the chances of ever finding like an old image of a house that's built that time frame? So I wanted to share it. But I thought that was kind of a cool aspect of the house that I had hoped to share with the new owner.
Fun fact about a house that I didn't live in, but I was very intimately acquainted with growing up. My grandfather hand-built the house that my grandparents lived in the Lakeway area.
Oh, wow.
My uncle lives there now.
Oh, wow.
He built it himself. Nice house. Very strange layout, which, hand-built by a guy who wasn't an architect. My grandpa was a shoe repairman. So
I remember you telling those stories.
But yeah, very nice house. But
shoe cobbler.
I was told growing up that he built it himself.
Well, obviously he must have done a good job, because there's
Still
a lot
there.
of things built today that won't be here tomorrow.
Still there. Yep.
If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, give it a like and a share, and don't forget to subscribe. You can find Nightmares on the Lost Highway on Facebook, on YouTube, Spotify, and a dozen other platforms. We would really appreciate your support. Just doing those few small things, those little likes, those sharings, it really makes a difference to us. And until next time, I'm Eric Tudor.
And I'm Bill Weirs.
You are. And together we bring you Nightmares on the Lost Highway. Thanks for listening.
Hey, real quick, call to action. I think Eric would agree. We'd like to grow this Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Absolutely.
If you could, if you're listening on Apple, if you would go and give us a review and rate us. If you have some feedback, that's fine too. Whatever platform you're listening, follow us, rate us, give us some reviews. That helps get some recognition and gets our name out there.
We do have a Facebook page, Nightmares on the Lost Highway. You can easily find us if you want to communicate with us, if you want to share some possibilities for future podcasts with us. Reach out. We want to talk with you guys. It is March 1976. Welcome to Circleville, Ohio.
77.
Cut and paste.
I was going to say, it all started in 77.
Cut and paste. It's great, but when you get it wrong the first time...
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.